r/malicious-compliance. Posted by user, Heterochromia Cat. Military spouse accuses me of cheating on my husband, with my husband. I've been living in Japan for a little over 2 years with my husband. He was born here and we decided to move to his hometown. It's a small city, but there's enough to do without getting bored. I describe us as an AMWF couple, Asian man, white female for those who don't know. It's not so common in Western countries, and it can feel like we are some rare shiny Pokemon, as AMWF in rural Japan, lots of staring, occasional secret picture, or even small chats if an old lady is brave enough to approach us. It can feel uncomfortable eating at a restaurant, because kids will turn around in their seat and stare at us the whole time with an open fish mouth. Coincidentally, there's a small US military base located in this city. The closer you are downtown, the more American families you see. I'm constantly mistaken for being military by Americans and Japanese, which is understandable. Besides myself, I only know 5 other interracial marriages here. It's always locals who ask about my American husband when I'm out alone, which I respond in Japanese, Watashi no Ata wa Nihonjin desu. Koko ni zunda imasu, my husband is Japanese and I live here, or something along those lines. Americans never ask about my marriage, as they assume my spouse is American. When we are together in public, we do abnormal couples behavior, such as holding hands. No, couples rarely hold hands in public, let alone say I love you. We don't go downtown too often since it's all pay to park, and it's a nightmare to find a place. It was a beautiful warm day for the first time in months, but we decided to battle for a spot, and walk around the shops. The crowd was heavy, since the weather was great and winter was ending. The season for new American families to move here just finished, so I'm sure this was many people's first time to leisurely walk and shop outside. We find a parking spot and made our way to the outside shops. Of course, we are holding hands and casually talking and laughing. Wow! I hear this from an American woman about 10 feet behind us. You should know that a Japanese stereotype against Americans is that we are rudely and obnoxiously loud. And this, well, was loud enough for me to turn my head around at the noise. She was with 2 other moms who had like 3 kids each. They were staring at me, but perhaps we just accidentally had eye contact at the right time.
Seriously, another little homewrecker is doing this in public?
Chill woman, you're so loud even I can hear you. We find a table nearby at the Starbucks outside. We are enjoying our drinks when the same group of women approached us with their strollers in tow. They definitely had some sort of purpose with something to say to us. Let's call her Ona, woman in Japanese.
Excuse me, but you need to keep whatever you're doing in your messed up home. Doing that in public in front of families to see is disgusting and immoral. My kids don't need to see such a bad display of marriage.
I'm so confused, as was my husband who can speak English. Who knew drinking coffee outside was a crime against humanity and marriage? I'm sorry. What did we do?
You know exactly what you're doing.
She points to my wedding ring. No, I don't.
Good Lord, does your husband know about this? Is he on a ship right now? That's so like a dependopotamus.
Her friends laugh. In case you don't speak military, a dependopotamus is slang for a military wife who stays at home all day, doesn't clean, uses their spouse as an ATM, and looks like Jabba the Hutt. It dawns on me, she thinks I'm a military spouse and I'm cheating on my American husband. I started laughing because she's suggesting I'm cheating on my husband, with my husband. This is my spouse. I'm actually not part of the military community and have a Japanese visa. Ona looks at my significant other up and down. The 2 women behind her apologize, but the Ona didn't believe it. She pulls out her phone to probably type my response. I'm offended since this is actually a nice place to live, and very open to foreigners. Look, my husband's name is Ray, not his real name. I don't want to reveal personal info, and he's sitting right here. I'm not going to show you my military ID, since I don't have one, and you're not the police. As proof, you can obviously see our wedding bands match, and here's a picture. I show her my phone screen, which is of us in traditional Japanese clothes on our wedding day. Her eyes became huge at the picture. Her two friends and their spawn have already started walking away. Stop. The things you are saying are extremely offensive. I was part of the military community myself some years ago, and what you're doing is against vassal conduct.
Go ahead and tell people what I did then. My high-ranking husband is an E7, and everything will be swept under the rug, no matter what happens. You can't touch me.
So that's what I did. Note, this is a small military community. Someone does something minor and it's talked about between wives like chickens. Later that day, I run into my friend who works on the base, and she's well known in the community for being one of the main event coordinators. I don't miss this chance to comply with Ona's demand, and explain to my friend about the exchange, and how it made my husband extremely uncomfortable with her remarks. She asked me if this person looked like so and so, which I said yes. My friend rolls her eyes.
She just arrived a couple of months ago, and is already causing problems with rumors and drama. Looks like we have a racist too. I'll make sure what she said is passed on.
It's been half a year later and I didn't hear anything about Ona again since I distanced myself from making military friends here. I've only been in my new city for a little over 2 years and experienced more drama from military families than I have my whole high school career. That is, until now. Last week, I ran into my friend who's getting ready to leave back to the United States. We had a little discussion about her moving and my family planning, and dropped a bombshell.
Do you remember Ona, who accused you of cheating on your non-existent military spouse, and called your husband a racist name?
Of course. I haven't heard anything from her since.
Well, I mentioned we were already having problems with her not long after she got here. I told my boss that there's a person who is bothering and threatening civilians, and asking for IDs, which isn't allowed for someone with her status. My boss was extremely interested after I mentioned her name because Ona was scheduled for an interview in my department. I suggested we look at her social media accounts from her past behavior, because we don't tolerate racism. It was easy to find her Twitter and Facebook, particularly Facebook, since we have many mutual friends. Her SNS was shocking. While she set her Facebook to private, her Twitter was littered with malicious tweets and retweets. This included racism slang for many nationalities, colorful language, and using her husband's military rank to bully others. She made it very clear that she wants to see her current city burn to the ground, and why would anyone want to learn Japanese, since it sounds terrible. We printed some of the more extreme things she posted and we still invited her to the interview. Oh, and did I mention my boss is Japanese? So she comes into the interview, which I was part of. I asked 3 good things about her, which is she says, dependent, gets things done, and friendly. My boss just looked at her for a second before he pulled out her tweets and asked her to explain how she can friendly serve the local community if she hates it so much. Ona was floored and said someone hacked into her account, despite there being at least 3 years of slanderous tweets. We thanked her for coming and said we can't accept an employee with this conduct. As far as I know, she's still not working because some spouses found her Twitter, not long after the interview, and were shared in all departments. No one will touch her application now.
So all of this was discovered because I told you about her accusations?
Yes. Oh, and she's kind of an outcast socially right now because she cheated on her husband a couple of months ago.
There you have it, folks. Because one person couldn't mind their own business, they lost a potential job and had their social media exposed. Super ironic, since she became the dependopotamus and adulterer, the same thing she was accusing me of. Posted by user, Chair Cavalry. Police officer attempted to intimidate my patient, loses fight to physics. I'm a paramedic. A few months ago, we're coming back from a routine patient transfer when at an intersection about 4 blocks from the base. I notice a woman sitting on the side of the road with her arms wrapped around herself and her head down. I nudge my partner who's driving, and we flip on the lights and I see her head come up real fast, and she looks terrified. I get out, and she relaxes when she sees the ambulance. After I approach, I notice bruising on her wrists and other similar signs of domestic abuse. She seems hesitant to get up off the curb and into the ambulance, so I decided that I would at least pull the cot out of the back, and give her something a little more comfortable than concrete to sit on. Now a few important details. All the cots in my service are striker-powered cots. You've almost certainly seen these before. They're bright yellow with black handles and side panels. These cots have a motor and battery built in to allow us to raise and lower the cot at the touch of a button, instead of throwing out our backs having to physically lift the cot up after loading someone. They're usually paired with an automatic loading system, built into the ambulance that lifts the cot up to the right height to be pushed inside and also secures the cot when loaded. There's a little red tab at the end of the track, just inside the doors, that you press down to free the cot, and allow it to slide out. When you press this tab, it simply releases the cot and the loading carriage it's connected to, and it's up to you to keep it under control until it reaches the unload position and locks into place again. This can be problematic because these cots weigh about 125 pounds, about 55 kilograms. As soon as I hit the release tab for the cot, I hear lights and sirens behind me. It's a city police car. Which is weird because we had not yet requested police, and we were outside the city, in the sheriff's department jurisdiction. We merely informed dispatch that we were stopping to check on a woman at such and such intersection. The woman says something along the lines of, "Oh God, he's here," and moves faster than me seeing free food being distributed at base. She dashes past me and pretty much hurls herself into the ambulance, sitting on the bench seat. The cop is approaching and he's pissed. I put two and two together and slam the ambulance doors shut. Let's call this officer Police Officer Steve, or POS for short.
Is that bit? Is she in there?
Who?
You know damn well who I am talking about.
You mean my patient? I'm afraid I haven't gotten a name yet.
Open those doors, I need to talk to her.
You're not using my rig as an interview room. You can talk to her at the hospital. We go back and forth like this for a few minutes. My partner at some point came back to see what the holdup was, but overheard my stonewalling, and went back to the cab to call our chief. I continue my routine of deny and delay until a pair of deputies, likely specifically requested for this by the chief, arrive. Oh good, now I have witnesses. See, we had stopped on an upwards incline. I had hit the release tab on the cot and it wanted to slide back. I had to close the door so swiftly, I didn't bother pushing the cot back against the stops and locking it in place. Emboldened by the presence of two deputies, he gets in my face.
Get out of my way or I'm gonna have to charge you with obstruction.
Okay. I step out of his way, and he opens the double doors. Between the cot, the monitor, and the jump bag, I'd say there was probably close to 160 pounds contained by those doors. All of which comes barreling out and hits POS, square in the chest. He goes backwards and falls on his ass. One of the deputies laughs aloud. The other walks up and kneels down beside the guy.
Your shift captain is going be here in 5, I wouldn't be here then if I were you. Your shift captain is going be here in 5, I wouldn't be here then if I were you.
POS gathers himself up and scowls at me, then stomps off. There is a limited amount that I can say about the aftermath as the trial is not settled yet, but we all know how well charges stick to cops. The woman is now living elsewhere, the cop is still a cop, and I have been getting pulled over at least twice a week ever since then. But the video footage of him getting body checked by that cop remains one of the best things I have seen. Edit, for clarification, yes, the woman was/is married to POS. And yes, he is allegedly responsible for the abuse. If you like these stories, hit that like button, and leave a comment below. You can upvote these stories by pressing the links in the description. If you want to hear more stories from me, hit the subscribe button, and press the bell icon to be alerted when a new video is posted.